I'm trying to wait for the people outside, the like lawnmowers and stuff, to stop being so loud, but whatever. Hello, welcome to my new channel. My name is Sophie, and this is my booktube channel, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys about books over here. Good books, bad books, everything in between. This is the space for you if you enjoy reading or want to get into reading. I am a voracious reader. I am especially a mood reader, and my favorite genres and mostly all that I read are romance and fantasy. And yeah, I'm really excited about this channel and what we're going to do with it. But of course, what better way to start than to talk about my personal favorite books of all time, the books I would literally sell my soul for to read for the first time again. And I have a little stack over here, but also a couple other books that I read digitally. I'm really serious though when I say that the noise in here is not great. Unfortunately, my AC is blowing, people outside while mowing lawns, and I'm just gonna do my best. But you know what, it's the first video. We're gonna make some mistakes, and let's just get into it. So, the first two books I want to talk about today are part of my all-time favorite fantasy series of all time. I read this series for the first time 3 or 4 years ago. Although I read a lot of romance and fantasy and romantasy books, this series held up the test of time. Nothing has ever been better series-wise for me, and that is the Throne of Glass series. So, the Throne of Glass series is a very long 8-book series by Sarah J. Maas, including the prequel. This is book 5 and 6 in the series. Now, I do have the entire series in paperback, so this is the first book, Throne of Glass, although if you count the prequel, it's technically the second book. This series is about a girl named and we meet her in the salt mines of Endovir, where she's been captured and basically worked as a salt mine slave for a year, and then she gets released out of it because a prince is taking her and wants her to become his, like, I forgot what it's called, like a challenger? His champion, that's what it's called. And basically she gets put into this like competition, and it's like a fight to the death thing, right? But that's just book 1. From there, the story really evolves. Like I said, it's a very long, very in-depth series, and we follow Selena and a bunch of other characters as they go through different trials. There's a lot of magic involved. A whole fantasy world unfolds. So right here, the magic is very limited in book 1, but we meet multiple fae throughout the rest of the series, and there's a war going on, and there are hidden identities, lots of old secrets that they have to figure out. I'd recommend the entire series, but my favorite books in the series are books 5 and 6, if you count the prequel as book 1. But they're just really rich. At this point in the story, you've met a lot of new characters that kind of enter into the story at different points, and they each become meaningful in their own separate ways. And these books have a lot of different POVs. So you get the main POV of Selena, you get the POV of her love interest, and then you also get the POV of a lot of different characters. The plot is really, really intense. In these books, in the middle is where you have the most relationship building and political intrigue and just really interesting like side quests and stuff. And that's what I love in a fantasy series, because you've already gotten past the world building of the beginning, but you're not quite to like the epic end. You're like in that really fun middle section. And also, I love her characters. Her characters are just amazing. Selena is a badass. I just love her. And yeah, literally the best fantasy series I've ever read. My favorite characters of all time. Great romances, great connections. I love this series, and I will recommend it until the end of time. Okay, the next book is actually digital, and you're gonna find a lot about me is, although I love having physical copies of books, I am a college student, so I have to save quite a lot of money. So I find that a lot of times it's easier to buy books online or read them online or on my Kindle. But the next book that I'm gonna talk about, or 2 books, are Heartless and Reckless by Elsie Silver. So Heartless is book 2 and Reckless is book 4 in the 5-book series called Chestnut Springs. And it's actually a cowboy romance series. Now here's the thing, okay? I live in Texas, and so you may think that I'm really like a cowgirl kind of person, right? But unfortunately I'm not. Like, it's really not my thing. I think it's very stereotypical, and also surrounded by cowboy hats and mullets and stuff 24/7. Like, I just think it's cringe, you know? So unfortunately it's usually not my vibe, and I was kind of turned off by it. However, something about Elsie Silver's writing will make you love the cowboys. Like, come on. So the series is about a small town romance. And now it's thundering. I'm trying so hard to get through this video. The weather and the AC is really working against me. So it's a small town romance series, and each book follows a different brother or family friend in this little family on a ranch and like different houses and stuff. Of course, each have their own like little romances in the different books. So book 2 is Cade, that's the brother, and he is a grumpy single dad, and he has a little kid named Luke. And usually I'm not a huge fan of children in books. Usually they're annoying. I mean, I like little kids, but in books they usually take away from like the main part of the story that I'm interested in. However, Luke in this book is the most adorable kid I've ever read about. He's so funny. He's like little, but he's really smart for his age. He like swears and his dad like makes, is mad at him and everyone makes fun of it. It's super funny. So I love this book. Anyway, it's a relationship between Cade and Willa, who is a friend of the girl from the first book, and Willa is coming to be the nanny of Luke. So there's that little relationship there. In book 4, this is the relationship between Winter, who is the sister of the girl from book 1. She was recently divorced. She's going through a really tough time and she's just really like spiky. She's very wintry, she's grumpy. She's the grumpy in this sunshine relationship. And then Theo, who is a bull rider, he is the sunshine one. So it's their relationship in that second book. And I don't know, these books were my favorites out of the series, but I love every book in this series. This is the only contemporary romance series that I've given the entire thing 5 stars. They all just really work well. And one thing is, it's because Elsa Silver can write just really great relationships that are easy to understand, great banter, are just quick and simple, but you can really feel the connection between them, and it's just really easy to get into. I'd highly recommend these series. It's just really fun, really good. There are a couple deep moments, but mostly it's just a very lighthearted series with really lovable characters, and there's a lot of found family aspect, and it's just super, super wholesome. So Heartless, Reckless, and every other book in the series. Next, let's talk about If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This book was a recent read last year. My friend Ceci recommended it to me, and this book was so good and just so geniusly written. So as a little premise, this book is about a theater school, and there are 7 students that are seniors in this theater school. I think they're seniors, but near the beginning of the book, one of them dies. And so the question is, who did it? What happened? Was it a suicide? Was it a murder? What's going on? Very mysterious, very dark academia vibes. It's just wonderful. And then one more thing is, the theater camp or school specifically focuses on Shakespeare. So I am not a huge Shakespeare person. I have read a couple of his plays before, and I have experience, but I'm not like a die-hard Shakespeare fan. However, this book was so interesting because not only were the characters performing different Shakespeare plays, and the author actually used that to tell more of the story because they used the actors and their like scripts to tell the story of the characters. Does that make sense? But on top of that, there was also like quotes directly from Shakespeare that is integrated into the writing, and it's just beautiful the way it's done. It's genius, honestly. M.L. Rio, the author, has so much experience with Shakespeare. You can tell that she really knows her stuff, and it's just really impressive to read. Now, the main character of this book, the one that we follow, is Oliver, and he's the character that out of the 7 theater kids that we're mainly focusing on, he's the one that's like the most stand back. He's like watching everything, but he doesn't really involve himself too much. There is a little bit of romance sprinkled in, but there's a lot more like mystery, intrigue. It's just really interesting watching the relationships between these 7 students with, hard pasts, some family troubles, some traumas, but they come to this school and they really bond with each other and connect to each other and lean on each other until one dies, and then it's like, who do we trust? Really, really good. It's a standalone, but really sad, really in deep, really well written. The ending did make me sob my little heart out at the end of it. I was like in pieces, but although I won't spoil, if you finish the book or you have read it and you want to read some conspiracy theories about it, because the ending is very sad, if you want to read some conspiracy theories, there are some that make me feel better about the ending. I'm not so sad about it anymore because of the way it ended, if that makes sense. So yeah, there are some things posted online that help me feel so much better about this ending, but overall it's just a beautiful book of dark academia vibes, and I would definitely read this in like October or September and just really immerse yourself in this world. Okay, the next book, or 2 books, are actually books that I read quite a few years ago, like 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, but they still stuck with me as my best books from like my early teens, and just generally really good books. So the first one is my #1 comfort book from when I was younger. I first read this when I was like 13 years old, and that is Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater. I'm sorry for mispronouncing her name, but this is a YA werewolf dystopian, because of course those were the main tropes that were incredibly popular in like the mid-2010s, right? But this book right here is just incredibly nostalgic to me. So part of the reason why I would just like die to read this book again for the first time, it's just because it has a lot of like personal meaning for me, and also just the feelings that I have for this book just make me want to cry because it's so nostalgic for me. But I do think in general, even if you're not a super like YA person, this book is still super meaningful. So it's about, of course, a werewolf. So it's a guy named Sam who's a werewolf, and a girl named Grace who lives in a house next to the woods, and she's always seen the wolves and been curious with them, but she's never interacted with them them, except for one time when she was very little and she got surrounded by a pack of wolves when she was left outside by her very, very neglectful parents. And she was going to get eaten by the wolves, right? But one of them, she kind of faintly remembers, picked her up, or maybe it was a human that picked her up and brought her to the house. And you can see where I'm going with this, and that it probably was Sam, right? So anyway, Sam turns into a human and they meet for the first time as humans. And the thing is with the werewolves is they are only human during the warmer months, and then they are werewolves during the colder months. It's a little different of the normal like werewolf mystery and myth, right? So every another year that you turn to a werewolf, your period in the summer gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And so he turns into a werewolf in like mid-September. And it's like, wait, if you waited this long during the summer months to turn to a human, then this might be your last year of changing before next year you may go all summer and still be a wolf basically forever. And so of course it's that very sad like right person wrong time thing, because they're like falling in love with each other during the end of the summer, but like this could be his last year as a human kind of thing. Really, really simply written. Of course, it's YA. I think the relationship is it's just beautiful. It doesn't have to have a lot to it to still be very meaningful, very sad, very beautiful. This is in a series, so it's 4 books. The last one we don't really talk about, so it's really just 3 books. And I do love the other 2 books as well in like the main section of the series, but the first one just stands out to me as just the classic book. It has Grace, it has Sam. I just love them so much. And yeah, if you're a YA person, if you like werewolves or those kinds of stories, please pick this up. It's an old book, oldish, you know, it's like 10 years old, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book and I definitely recommend it all the time. So the next book on this list, I am probably 85% sure that most of you have read, and that is The Hunger Games, of course. Now, for being particular, I feel like The Hunger Games, the first book, is like not my favorite. My favorite book would probably be either Catching Fire or Mockingjay. But anyway, that entire series is what I'm talking about. It's just a favorite series of mine. Now, if you live under a rock and don't know the premise of Hunger Games, let me just break it down real quick. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian in post-apocalyptic USA. So essentially, there was some huge battle that like wiped up what currently is the United States, and it changed the layout. So now there is one capital, which is where all the powerful government and all the rich people live in like their furs and feathers, and they spend lots of money. And then everywhere else around the capital is split into 12 districts, 1 through 12. 1 is like the most rich and powerful, and then 12 is like the most poor and they don't have much food. And so all these 12 districts are around the rest of the country, right? So Katniss, our main character, lives in District 12, and there is this tournament or competition called the Hunger Games that the capital puts on every single year, where they pick 1 boy and 1 girl, either aged 12 to 18, from each district, so basically 24 contendants, put them in a big ring and say, fight to the death. Yeah, and the last one standing wins. Yay! It's supposed to be a reminder of how they don't want everyone to revolt. It's reminding the districts of how the capital has power and we're not going to do another revolution like happened 70 years ago. But of course, it is terrible watching these kids basically either die or kill other kids in a ring for like a couple weeks. It's awful. And it's obviously a social commentary and stuff like that. And there's just so many layers to this series, but it's just a classic. Like Hunger Games is just a good series. Of course, there's a little bit of a love triangle, but we know who she's gonna end up with. Let's be so for real. And there's also a prequel that was written more recently. I didn't read the prequel, but I did watch the movie. So I watched the movie for all the books, and they're good movies. I liked them. But personally, although I didn't read the prequel because I've heard kind of mid things about it, the prequel movie was one of my favorite movies ever. It's so good. The actors in that film are really good. It's Rachel Zegler, who has a gorgeous voice, and I think his name is Tom Blythe, who is really attractive. Oh my gosh. So yeah, really good series. If you haven't read it, what are you doing? Read the books, okay, and also watch the movies, because the movies are good. And I would love to read this for the first time again. Are you kidding? Fantastic. The rain has started, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's getting like darker and darker as this video goes on. So really, for the first video on my channel, we're doing really well. Lighting, sound, everything's messed up. I do have a second channel, by the way, so this isn't like my first channel I've ever made. I have a bullet journaling channel called Mingo Studio, which I will link in the description box below if you're interested in bullet journaling and want to see more content from me. But I'm just excited about this second channel to do something a little different, separately, and it's just unfortunate that this just happens to be done on a rainy day. So the next book I want to talk about, I have a paperback copy of, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Now this is a controversial book. This book blew up on TikTok last year, and then the sequel, Iron Flame, also came out. Now these 2 books I enjoy a lot. I'm one of the people that do enjoy this book. People think that it's like not very well written and just very cringy and or nothing original. It's very copycat. However, I do eat it up. Now this book I gave 5 stars. The sequel I gave 4 stars. I had some issues with it, but we're just not gonna talk about that in this video. I'll talk about it in a future video. But this one right here, I would love to read for the first time again. It was just really, really good. So this book follows Violet Soaringale, and she goes to a school for riders, and I mean dragon riders, okay? Now in this fantasy world, you can choose to be 4 things. You can be a scribe, you can be an infantry person, you can be a healer, or you can be a rider. Now she wanted to be a scribe, but her mother, who is a very famous rider, told her that she has to join this school or she's basically just gonna die. So she joined the school and she meets this guy named Xaden. Now Xaden is a deep, deep enemy of hers because her mother killed Xaden's father. So of course there's a rivalry there. And of course we're getting intense enemies to lovers in this book. And listen, I eat it up every time, okay? There's one thing about this book. The people that criticize it say that it's very formulaic, it's very copy-paste, you know, it has enemies to lovers, it has like training scenes, it's battling, it's riding dragons, it's, you know, simple things like that. It's not a very original or complex story, and I understand that, okay? However, if it ain't broke, you don't have to fix it, okay? It works very effectively in this, and I'm not complaining about it. So this book, I just flew through. It's very, very easy, and it would be a good book to recommend for beginners to this genre because really easy and simple world building, great character relationships, lots of banter, it's really funny. In fact, the dragons in this book actually talk, so they have like a lot of comedic relief in this book. Overall, it's just really easy to understand, great to get into. So it's nothing crazy and nothing difficult, but it was just fun and entertaining, and I can't diss a book for being fun and entertaining, you know? So anyway, I really do love this book. The sequel, like I said, I have some problems with, which I'll mention somewhere in a later video. Basically, I just think the communication is not as good, and it was a little bit like copying book 1 in some cases, but not important. I still am very excited about book 3 that's coming out later this year, I'm pretty sure, especially to beginners to the fantasy or romantasy genre. This is a great one, an easy one to pick up, and it's super fun. So I do recommend this one as well. The last book on this list is actually a very surprising one for me, and I was shocked when I read it and thought how good it was whenever I finished, because this is actually a fan fiction. Now, I'm not dissing fan fiction, okay? I love the concept of fan fiction. I just have never actually read one before, and so I didn't know what I was going to think. But basically, this book I'm talking about is Manacled by Sinlin Yu. Now, Manacled is a Hermione fan fiction, which is a relationship between Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter. Now, personally, I was never a Harry Potter kid, okay? I was always a Percy Jackson kid. I did read all the books and watched all the movies. I was never a Potterhead, but I can appreciate the stories for what they are. That being said, this fantasy I came across, it's very long, it's very detailed, but it was very, very good. Like seriously, the writing was really good. But to kind of step back and tell you what it was about, imagine in the last book of Harry Potter, right, there's that big war against Voldemort and then Harry wins, right? Well, in this book, it imagines it differently. It imagines it as if Voldemort won, Harry lost, in fact, Harry's dead, Ron's dead, mostly everyone is dead besides a couple characters like Ginny, Hermione, Draco, and then like Snape. And also Draco is on the bad side. And so Voldemort makes this whole system after the war that's very similar to Handmaid's Tale, if you've read that classic, which I did read, which basically is the story of a dystopian world where women that are handmaidens are basically surrogates for men. Men do have wives, but they instead have kids with the surrogates, and it's just a very messed up world. And Voldemort takes a very similar approach with his system to try to repopulate the Death Eaters by pairing them with muggles for surrogates. You can see where I'm going with this. Hermione is a muggle, Draco is a Death Eater. You get it, right? Reading this from Hermione's point of view, it is just terrible. We hate Draco, obviously. However, the middle 50% of the book is flashback to 3 years beforehand. Hermione was still in the war, they're both in the war, but Draco changed to the good side for reasons that you find out in the book. Hermione is the contact between Draco and the main, like the order. So Hermione and Draco have this little relationship where they meet once a week and like exchange information, and you find that they're very, very similar. He realizes he's very, very different from all the bad guys. Hermione, she's very ostracized as well. She's alone, she has no one to talk to, she has no one to relate to. In the middle of war with lots of death and grief, they instead lean on each other for help during the situation, and so because of that, they form a relationship as well. And so that section in the middle makes me want to cry to think about because it's so sweet, it's so sad. And then 3 years later, we flash back to the present. Now the rest of the story is trying to save them from Voldemort. It's crazy. It's very long, very in-depth, very sad, because a lot of this is about war and grief and PTSD and trauma and mental health, and it's hard to read, okay? But if you're in a good place to read it, it's also very beautiful and it's very well written. And I think that even though it is taking place in a fantastical world, there are a lot of elements that can be applied to real life about mental health and leading on other people and trusting people and recovering after something as traumatic as war and stuff like that. So it's really, really phenomenal. And since it is a fan fiction, it's completely free online. So go read it, download it, see what you think, tell me what you think. Not only is this the best book I've probably read all year, but it's also maybe the best standalone I've ever read. Ever. Because I was going through my Goodreads, which is the app that I use to track my books along with Storygraph. And if you want to follow me, they're both going to be linked down below. I'll follow you back. We can be friends. But when I was going through Goodreads and looking at all the books that I've ever rated 5 stars, I was like, you know what? Nothing holds up to this. Fantastic book. I love, love, love this book. And all the books that I mentioned today, these books I would literally sell my actual soul to read for the first time again. They're just phenomenal. And they're my #1 recommendations if you are a reader or want to get into reading out there. I hope you enjoyed. I'm so excited about this channel. Like I said, I have so many video ideas and I'm really excited to get this going. So please, if you're new here, subscribe because it's my first video, and introduce yourself in the comments. I'd love to chat with y'all, get to know you, and I will see you guys for my next video in just a couple days. Sending you so much love, and I'll see you then.